This is the Forgotten Icons podcast hosted by myself, William Simone. Join me in a retro investigation as we unearth media's lost and forgotten representatives. Hello and welcome to the Forgotten Icons podcast. I'm William Simone, your host, and obviously this is a special episode, not only because of our guest, but because it is the premiere episode of this podcast. So once again, welcome, and I hope you stay to see where this podcast goes in the future. Now, the goal of the Forgotten Icons podcast is to dust off old pieces of media and reminisce on what they were, while also discovering why they disappeared. In this episode, we will be unearthing the reality weight loss TV show, The Biggest Loser.
12 people who have struggled with weight their entire lives.
But we'll get more into that in just a second. First, with that long preface out of the way, I think it is time we introduce our special guest. We are joined by the fitness professional himself, Zach Watson.
This exercise right here is called a seated leg raise. If you take one wrong step, that's going straight to your joints. What I like about this exercise is it targets those lower abs. But as always, get after it. We're on day number 2. Let's go, baby.
Zach, how are you doing today?
You know what, William? I'm doing actually pretty swell today.
Well, that's good to hear. Can you elaborate on that? Any big events coming up in the horizon?
Oh, not too much. Just trying to get through school right now, just trying to get through the grind of life, taking it one day at a time.
Tell me a bit about your fitness credentials and what your plans are fitness-wise in the future.
So as of right now, I'm on the track to get my personal train certification through the NASM certification process. And I will start out becoming a personal trainer at the end of this school year for a couple years. And then possibly I'm going to get my strength conditioning certification through the CSDS program. And then hopefully open my own facility after 3 or 4 years of that.
So you would call yourself a fitness professional?
You know what, William? A lot of people call themselves professionals. I'm just an avid lover of fitness.
That's a good way to put it. Well, okay. Zach, I've known you for a long time, obviously, all the way back to elementary school. And obviously, you've gone through quite the fitness journey from being scrawny to a football player to eventually being an amateur bodybuilder and then a swimmer at this point. Tell me about that process. What encouraged you to go through these different changes in your life? How you started loving fitness and changing your body for the better. Tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, so basically, I started out as a very scrawny kid in high school. I did athletics, and what got me into lifting was I was bullied a lot during that process. And so I always thought that if I was bigger than my opponent, then that would make me less of a target. So that's what really got my intentions on lifting at first. But then once I started lifting more, I found the passion of coaching. And so now I've actually made my career about coaching people and having them actually introduce fitness into their life.
Gotcha. I've also seen, I follow you on Instagram, and you've sort of, with both Instagram and TikTok, tried to use that platform to encourage others to, make changes in their life in a healthy way. Tell me a bit about that goal and where you'd like to see that go.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, William, because I have started investing a lot more of my time into social media. And the whole purpose of that is just to inform users, because there's so much misinformation about training in the world today through TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, all of those different platforms. And there's not a lot of people that actually have research behind it and kind of guide people into all of this. Because if you look at TikTok, that demographic is such a young age for middle school to high school kids. And a lot of them see all of these different misinformation out there from the fitness industry, and they just run with it because they have nobody telling them what's right or wrong.
I'm glad you said that. I agree with that sentiment a lot. I think there's a lot of pseudo experts out there that really know even less than you do. You're in school to study fitness, so you know quite a bit more. There are people that know even less, and they're claiming to be experts in what they're teaching. We speak about misinformation and sort of negative habits or encouraging negative habits for people when it comes to making healthy changes in their life and meeting their fitness goals. That brings us into The Biggest Loser, which was a reality show back in about 2004 to 2006. It ran for a total of 17 seasons. And on the show, the contestants were typically overweight individuals who would initially conduct a starting weigh-in, and week by week, they would do weigh-ins to see which individual had lost the most weight. On top of that, rather than being individually evaluated, the contestants were put into one of 3 teams, and the team that lost the most total weight would be awarded the victory for that particular week. To start off, Zach, what do you, if any, do you have any memories of The Biggest Loser back in the day, or during your journey, have you come across it, and what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, so I have seen a couple episodes and some highlights, obviously, with TikTok becoming more famous. There always are those kind of highlight reels they have of The Biggest Loser. Yeah, I just have some very fond memories of it would always be about people trying to lose the most amount of weight possible. It was brought on to encourage people as a society to be healthier by losing weight.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's one of the back in the day, my mother used to watch The Biggest Loser a lot. I never really, I mean, I would sit there and watch the challenges and for the reality aspect, but I think it did motivate my mother back in the day to, get out there and lose weight. So I think that is one positive that came from the show. How do you feel about the structure of the show and how it sort of approached a weight loss? What were the positive aspects of that sort of structure, and what were the negative aspects in terms of like people meeting their fitness goals?
So obviously the whole point of the show had very great intentions behind it. What it does is it takes a whole group of people that are obviously overweight to a medical standpoint, and they want them to lose weight through a little bit of a competition to make it a little bit more fun, and it also puts them on a platform to encourage and inspire people to lose weight themselves. Now, the only problem is that this show only had one side that they were actually showing. They really showed how everyone was losing weight, how everyone was having a good time losing weight, how, well, the people that weren't losing weight were just people that were lazy and they were obese. And so they never really took a look at the other side to what are the cons behind this show, because there were many. So
yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. I think that when you really dig into it, as both of us did before coming here to this podcast, you do recognize all the terrible sort of practices that were encouraged on the show. And to start out, according to livescience.com, some contestants within the first week of the show, they lost roughly 20 or 30 pounds in just a single week. I mean, maybe you can speak more to this, but I looked up, it's recommended to lose about 1 to 2 pounds on a weekly basis if you're starting your weight loss journey. So, this is a dangerous amount of weight. Can you speak to why it's so dangerous to lose that amount of fat so quickly?
Yeah, I'll go into more depth. Just because you bring up the whole point about how so many of them lost around 20 pounds in the first week, and how you say that the studies show that it's healthy to lose 1 to 2 at most for a healthy diet. And honestly, the thing is even losing 1 to 2 pounds in a week's time is still a lot, because a lot of people, what they do is they lose that weight really fast in an unhealthy manner. And what happens is they end up putting that weight back on because their body has not had time to adjust their metabolism or how, let's say, their body's acting, because now you're losing a bunch of weight, your body's shifting into this state of homeostasis that's never been in before, and it's having a hard time maintaining your levels. Like I said before, a lot of people just lose weight all of a sudden, and they end up gaining that weight just right back because they don't take time to really invest and lose that weight through a natural process.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think we both looked into it. A lot of these contestants would lose upwards of 100 to 200 pounds in the run time of the show, and by the end, they somehow gained all that back. So, obviously fitness goals are meant to be individualized, and I talked about earlier how these contestants were put into groups to sort of encourage them to hold their weight and lose a certain amount of weight. So it's, used to motivate them more, which can be helpful in a sense. But several of these contestants, they would have the exact same training, which doesn't make a lot of sense because, most people have a different goal and different starting point. So they need to have individualized standards for how they run. And they had a 1 mile foot race, and I believe it was The Biggest Loser Second Chances, the spinoff series. It led to the hospitalization of 2 of the contestants on that show. I think that was due to like joint pain from them being too overweight to sustain that amount of mileage. But since the showrunners reportedly said that they changed the way they do the show, which is really just like PR talk. But how do you feel about that scandal and what issues come up in a situation like that?
Yeah, so I'm going to go off the first point you brought up about how they would put them in groups and they wouldn't really specialize any workouts towards a certain individual. It would just be to that group. And like you kind of brought up, is that so many people just try to do specific workouts because it worked for someone else. That's the thing, is that everybody has a different body that they have to work with. So the thing with having them as a group, there's a lot of effort, there's a lot of time that goes into investing in a certain group, because I will say being in a group is a little bit more encouraging to a lot of people trying to start their fitness journey. But in the long run, eventually you're going to have to specify things to that certain individual because they are going to hit a wall where stuff doesn't work for that person. So that's what I'll say about the first part. And then the second part, when you were saying about how they'd have challenges like the mile run at the beginning and how it hospitalized two different people. And that's just because they threw them into training without looking at the consequences of just because, let's say, if you look at a 185-pound person that's 6 foot, that doesn't really work out that much, and then you look at someone that's 300 pounds plus and let's say is 6 feet, that is going to be a substantial difference between how that impacts the body if both of them are not runners. So the 185-pound person, that person is still going to have an easier time running that mile than the person that's over 300 pounds, just because they have more body weight to move. So that's the thing with those kind of challenges that I saw on the show, is that they would just throw them right into them just because a lot of their trainers thought, well, if I could do them, why can't they? And they wouldn't look at every individual person that, can they do it? Can that person do it? Oh, I can do it, so they should be able to. So that was another part of the show that was really on the downfall and did not showcase those type of ways in their reality show.
As someone that's interested in coaching and like personal training, would you place any blame on these instructors for how they were encouraging these contestants to train? Like, what's the difference between these trainers and someone that's a personal trainer actually?
Basically, for the show, I was watching some clips and everything, and obviously, at the end of the day, it is a reality TV show. They're going to do what gets ratings, not what's best for their contestants, what's the best way to train, because some of the videos I was seeing from the personal trainers, they would just be screaming, cursing at their clients to keep going. And yes, that gets ratings, but a lot of times it's actually starting to see in some of the coaching classes I've taken, some of the coaching philosophies is that a huge portion of people that are being coached do not like to get yelled at. That actually shuts down their motivation. And yes, that's the whole basically stereotype behind a very dedicated coach. You think of a dedicated football coach as just screaming at people. He's just trying to break you down, when a lot of people that just start their fitness journey don't want to be yelled at, don't want to be completely mentally broken down during these challenges, because they're already put in a vulnerable state of being weak, of being shown on a national scale that they can't do what they're putting them up to do. As a human, we have a hard time admitting to when we can't do something, and an even worse time knowing that someone's going to see us failing at those things. So for me, I really think that a lot of that show for their personal training and their workouts was a lot due to ratings and not for the best, most efficient way to train those clients.
That definitely makes sense. Regardless of the challenges and like the training solely, there's a lot of problems in that aspect. Diet and what you're putting in your body is a major component to weight loss. It seems a lot of these contestants would or they were encouraged by their coaches to use very drastic measures to hit their target weight and win the victory for that week. There was a contestant by the name of Ryan Benson. He was the winner of the first season of the show, and he admitted he would fast and dehydrate himself to the point where he was urinating blood. And several other contestants admitted to dehydrating themselves amidst very hard training, so they would pretty much have nothing to go on. How important is the diet to losing weight, and are these forms of fasting dehydration sustainable to the degree they were doing it on the show?
So if you look at a proper diet revolves around losing fat. And the worst part about this Biggest Loser challenge is that they compared weight at the beginning to the end. And if you think about how you measure fat on your body, just weighing yourself is not an accurate representation. So if you look at those extreme samples as dehydration, that's one of those things that makes you lose a lot of weight all of a sudden, but then you have to put that weight back on or else your body's going to go into failure, such as you were talking about that one person on the show that was urinating blood. He did not have enough nutrients in his body to function properly. And so that's when it comes to, obviously back to ratings, it's better to see someone lose a bunch of weight in a short amount of time in someone to naturally lose that weight in a process by eating right, by training right, by doing it consistently over 2 to 3 years, and that person never puts that weight back on. So for basically when the diets and how these contestants would go to extremes, at the end of the day, it's for ratings. At the end of the day, they did have a huge money prize at the end. For I think the money prize was, if and you could correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think it was around $125,000. If you look at it, at the end of the day, a lot of people will do stuff for $125,000. If you go and tell someone, hey, would you start training tomorrow if you knew that your life was going to be extended by 5 years? A lot of people won't do that. If you say, hey, I'll pay you $50,000 at the end of 6 months if you train every single day, a lot of people will do that. The people, money's more important than their actual health.
The Biggest Loser continued running despite all of this different controversy, but a few claims put the final nail in the coffin for the original series of the show in 2016 when Joelle Gwynn, a 2008 contestant, claimed Bob Harper, her trainer, which was like the main host of the show, would supply her Yellow Jacket weight loss pills containing ephedra extract, which is an FDA-banned supplement. Around the same time, allegations came out accusing the showrunners of manipulating weigh-ins to kick boring contestants off the show. Zach, obviously weight loss pills and supplements are still around. How do you feel about them? Are they dangerous or even effective in the long run?
So if you look at what you just said, William, and the weight loss pills they were giving on the show were FDA banned supplements. A lot of supplements aren't controlled by the FDA. A lot of them are on the market and they are actually not regulated. So I've been a huge proponent of researching your supplements. Honestly, it's best to go have a good workout regimen and proper diet before you even consider adding different supplements into the mix, just because it's one of those things where it requires a lot of research because none of them are regulated. And the fact that they would try to give contestants weight loss pills and supplements just proves that this was all for ratings because they wanted to do whatever was possible to get that number on the scale to go down or go up for certain people just to provide a narrative for their reality show.
I would say it's even similar to sort of how it's not even that they're using the pills, it's the fact that they're not being transparent that they are. Because it's similar to how for these superhero celebrities, they sort of will take, different supplements to gain a large amount of muscle mass in an unnatural rate. And they're not really honest about using those, and that can hurt the other people going on a similar journey and discourage them from continuing. So do you think there are any positives from The Biggest Loser in the long run? Do you think it should ever return? And if so, what changes would you make to the show?
At the end of the day, it was a benefit to have that show. Yes, there were so many things that went wrong with it, but if you think about it, how many people can you go up to and say, do you know The Biggest Loser TV show? How many people will say, oh, I've heard about that, or I remember that. And it's one of those things where their huge intention was to get people to lose weight. So many people, that's the only thing that they actually thought about that show, was that they were trying to make an effort to make people lose weight. And so I do think that it was necessary for a show like this to run on TV because it reached a huge audience of people, even though it's unrealistic to have those achievable things without performance-enhancing drugs. It still gives that hope that people could be just like that. And that's sometimes all people need to get started in their fitness journey. So I do think that the intentions of the show were very good. And yes, there was a lot of sacrifice into it and a lot of bad that has come because of this show. But I do think this show was necessary because they even look back on it now about the mental health that played a huge factor in so many of the contestants. That would never probably be shown for a while if this show never ran. And it really shows how much mental health plays into these fitness transformations.
Well, I think that's very well said, Zach. Thank you very much for being here. I think that's about time, though, so we're going to have to wrap it up here for episode 1 of the Forgotten Icons podcast. Thank you, Zach, once again for joining me. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the Forgotten Icons podcast. If you have topic suggestions for us to dive into, head over to our website at forgottenicons.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, consider giving us a positive review on the streaming platform of your choice. For any updates, follow me on Instagram and Facebook at @TheWilliamSimone.
There's